All right, Algebra 2 Trig. We're going to start looking at how to use the unit circle. So let me bring up the lesson here. So this is lesson 5. Inverse trig on the unit circle. All right, so have a unit circle filled out. I think there's one on my website that you can refer to, but you should have one already filled out that you tried. All right, so we're looking at the unit circle, and so the inverse is telling us to find an angle. Okay, so that's what theta is. That's what we're looking for. Find the angle. There's two angles for most of these, where the sine of that angle is root 3 over 2. All right, so we want to remember that the sine is the y value, the y coordinate. And so we want to look around our unit circle and find out, well, when is the y coordinate equal to root 3 over 2? All right, and it's telling us that the sine is of the angle is positive root 3 over 2. And so we know that the sine is positive in two quadrants. So we want to remember what are the signs in each of the quadrants. All right, so we know that quadrant 1 is positive, positive. In quadrant 2, it's negative, positive. In quadrant 3, everything was negative. And then in quadrant 4, it was positive and then negative. All right, and then we can also remember that ASTC. This tells us which trig functions are positive along with their inverses, or the reciprocals. So all students take calculus, ASTC. So all trig functions are positive in 1. Sine and its reciprocal, the cosecant, is positive in 2. Tangent and its reciprocal, cotangent, is positive in quadrant 3, and cosine and its reciprocal, the secant, is positive in quadrant 4. All right, so going back to this first question, sine, we want to look at what two quadrants is the sine positive in, because positive root 3 over 2 is what we're looking at. Well, sine is positive in 1 and 2, so we only have to look in quadrants 1 and 2 to get our answer. And so we're looking at when is the y coordinate root 3 over 2? Well, it's going to happen at 60 degrees, okay, and then it happens again directly across from it at 120 degrees. All right, so 60 degrees and 120 degrees. Now in the directions, it says give your answer in radians and degrees, so we'll give the radian answers also. So 60 degrees, that lines up with the pi over 3, and 120 degrees lines up with the 2 pi over 3. All right, so that's both answers. All right, so number 2, secant of theta equals negative 2. Secant theta equals negative 2. So when you have the reciprocal function, sometimes it helps to do the other trig functions. All right, so secant is the reciprocal of the cosine. And so if we use the cosine, okay, the reciprocal of secant is cosine, well, we have to do the reciprocal of negative 2, so that's going to be negative 1/2. All right, and so just like we did with number 1, cosine is our x value. Okay, so we're looking for the x value this time. And when is it negative? That's where we're going to look. All right, so cosine's positive in 1 and 4. So that means it's negative in 2 and 3. So that's where we have to look, 2 and 3. So in quadrant 2, we want to see when is the x coordinate negative 1/2. Well, it happens at 120 degrees, okay, which again is 2 pi over 3. And then it's going to happen in quadrant 3, okay, since we found a 2 pi over 3, then the other multiple of pi over 3 is going to be the answer. And so that's 4 pi over 3, which is 240 degrees. All right, so 4 pi over 3. All right, so there's both degrees, both angles in degrees and radians. All right, so let's go tangent. All right, so tangent, remember, is the y value divided by the x value. Well, there's a root 3 in this. So if you look at your ordered pairs, there's not all of them have some kind of a root 3 in it. Okay, none of the 45 degree angles, pi over 4s, have even a root 3 in it. So you know it can't be one of those. So again, according to our ASTC quadrants, okay, tangent is negative in 2 quadrants. All right, so it's going to be negative in quadrants 2 and 4. So that's where we're going to look, 2 and 4. All right, so if you look at quadrants 2, all right, so we need y value divided by the x value. So if you take an ordered pair and divide it, you're trying to find out which one gives you negative root 3 over 3. All right, so if let's say we took, let's say we didn't know. And so let's just take the first one, 120 degrees. All right, so at 120 degrees, if we did the ordered pair y divided by x, root 3 over 2, and we divide it by negative 1/2, okay, y over x, and now if we simplify that, so if you remember in another video I said if the denominators are the same, you can cancel out. Well, this is going to simplify to negative root 3 over 1, but that's not negative root 3 over 3. So you know it can't be the 120 degree one. So it means it has to be the other one, the 150. All right, and it is the 150. All right, so 150 degrees. Okay, and that radian is 5 pi over 6. All right, now we know that it's going to be negative in quadrant 4 also. So all you have to do is go to quadrant 4 and find the other pi over 6. That's 11 pi over 6. And then its degree was 330. All right, so it helps to kind of narrow it down. If you know it's got to be one of two angles, find one of them, the answer, and if it ain't that one, it's got to be the other one. All right, so cosecant has to be -1. So cosecant is the reciprocal of the sine. All right, so if we do the reciprocal function for cosecant, it's sine. And if we do the reciprocal of -1, well, -1 over 1, if you flip it, it's still -1. All right, so now on the unit circle, sine, again, is our y value. And so we want to look, when is sine -1? So anytime the answer is a 0, equal to 0, or 1, or -1, look on the axes, because that's where you're going to find your answer. So at y is -1, okay, it's going to occur only one time, and that happens at 270 degrees. And then the radian is 3 pi over 2. All right, so let's go ahead and try number 5. So cotangent is undefined. All right, excuse me. So cotangent, well, we know cotangent is x over y, and so again, this is x over y. So when can cotangent be undefined? Well, it can only be undefined if we're trying to divide by 0. So if the y value is 0. So that's all we have to do is go on the axes and find out when is the y value 0. Okay, so y is 0 at 0 degrees and 0 radians. And then it's also 0 directly across. Okay, that's at 180 degrees and 0. Pi. Okay. All right, secant is root 2. Secant is root 2. So the reciprocal of secant is the cosine. And the reciprocal of root 2, well, think of it as root 2 over 1 and then flip it. Okay, so that's 1 over root 2. And then we could multiply top and bottom by root 2. So that's root 2 over 2. All right, so if secant is root 2, then cosine is root 2 over 2. And it's positive, and cosine's positive in 2 quadrants, so number 1 and number 4. So that's where we're going to look. And again, cosine is the x value. So we want to find out in 1 and 4, when is the x value root 2 over 2. All right, so we can see it's at 45 degrees, and that's pi over 4. I'll put it down underneath. All right, and then in quadrant 4 it happens again, and that's 315, and its radian measure is 7 pi over 4. All right, so number 7, sine is -1/2. All right, so sine is negative in 2 quadrants. Okay, sine is negative in quadrants 3 and 4. And again, sine is our y coordinate. All right, so we'll go down to quadrant 3, find out when is the y coordinate -1/2. So it happens at 210 degrees, which is 7 pi over 6. And then it happens again in quadrant 4, the other pi over 6, which would be 11 pi over 6. And then its degree is 330. All right, number 8, secant is undefined. So secant is the reciprocal of the cosine, and cosine is our x. All right, so we want to know when is x equal to 0, okay, because secant is 1 over x, the reciprocal of the cosine, which is x. All right, so now find out when, again, is the x value 0. So x is 0 at 90 degrees, okay, and that's pi over 2. And then directly down below it is 270, and that's 3 pi over 2. All right, tangent is positive root 3. All right, so this again is y over x. All right, so tangent is root 3. It's positive, and so it's positive in 1 and 3. So let's find the 1 in quadrant 1. And again, it has a radical 3 in it, so you know it can't be the 45-degree one. It has to be pi over 6 or pi over 3. All right, and so I think we already did one that we can use, because we found one that was negative root 3. That's question 3. Okay, so at 120 degrees, when we simplified it, it was negative root 3. So directly across from it is the pi over 3. All right, so let's try that one, pi over 3, which is the 60-degree one. All right, so again, if you do the y value, okay, so we look at the 61 just to see. If you do the y value, divide it by the x value, okay, and we simplify it, this simplifies to root 3 over 1, or root 3, and that's what we want. All right, so we found it, 60 degrees, which is pi over 3. All right, and then it's also positive in quadrant 3, so just find the other pi over 3, which is 4 pi over 3. All right, and then its degree is 240. All right, number 10, cosecant. All right, so cosecant is the reciprocal of the sine. And so we want to flip this. All right, so I'm going to flip it. It's negative 3 over 2 root 3. And I'm going to rationalize this by multiplying by root 3. So it's negative 3 root 3 over, that's 3 times 2, which is 6. And then we can simplify this to negative root 3 over 2. Negative root 3 over 2. So we want to go on our unit circle and find out when is the y value negative root 3 over 2. All right, so the y value is negative in 2 quadrants, right, and that's down at the bottom half, 3 and 4. And so the y value is negative root 3 over 2 at 240, and that's also 4 pi over 3. All right, and then it's directly across the other pi over 3, which is 5 pi over 3, and its degree is 300. All right, almost done. All right, cotangent. All right, so cotangent is x over y. Okay, you can work with cotangent, and that's fine. You could do the reciprocal, tangent, and negative 1 over 1. If you did the reciprocal, it's still negative 1. So we want to find out if we divide something by something else, we get negative 1. All right, well, tangent's negative in quadrants 2 and 4. And so it's only going to happen at the 45-degree marks. Okay, if you take something and divide it by itself that are opposite signs, they have to be the same, but if they're opposite signs, you get negative 1. So that's going to be at the 135-degree mark, which is 3 pi over 4. Okay, and then in quadrant 4, it's negative, okay, at the other pi over 4, which is 7 pi over 4. And then that's 315 degrees. All right, and the last one, secant. The reciprocal is the cosine, and if we do the reciprocal of 1, we still get 1, and cosine is our x value. So we want to look, when is the x value 1, and it has to be positive. So it happens at 0 degrees, 0 radians. All right, and if you look around the unit circle, that's the only time that it happens. Okay, so that's it. All right, so good luck. We'll see you.